Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is another episode of Into the Abyss. I'm Roger Hanson, and today we have on our roundtable panel Bob Dub, Old John, and Vincent, VJM Publishing, and this is Michael Paul, his second time on my shows, and I'd like to welcome him to the show and welcome all you guys to the show. Before we get started, I'd like to start out by giving a little bit of a background on what's been going on with these interviews. Now, when I first was thinking this through, I was going to have Michael kind of discuss some of the stuff that he was talking about, but then I was like, hold on, maybe I should just bring up a little bit on what was in the interview and then let you guys give some feedback on it, and then let Michael talk about it. And then I had some stuff here too that pertained to the interview that I did with Summer. I can bring those up and everything because there's some things that was in what she said that Michael Paul said that I think is relevant to what this topic is going to be. Okay, so are you okay with that, Michael?
Yes, I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that.
Okay, so with that being said, let me kind of go over a little bit of what was discussed. Now, see, when we were doing our interview, Michael discussed synchronicity and that coincidences aren't real. Okay, everything happens for a reason. Your minds are creating these events. He went on to say that he thought he was going mad for months because he was seeing connections, things that were thought unconnected, but he was seeing connections. Okay. Then he went on to say that he had experienced, an experience that felt like a tsunami wave of information that flowed into him. He also felt sudden pains in his stomach at certain times. He had feelings as though he was going to have a seizure. He also had visions of a jigsaw puzzle of information that was coming together in his mind's eye, and it was very rapid, and he literally told himself to slow down, and the vision slowed down on him. Okay? Now, that was one or a few things. He went on later to say that he's been to, I believe it was Rome. He's also been to monasteries, and he has geometric symbols that would jump out at him, okay, when he goes into these places. Now, that was part of the interview that I wanted to bring up when it comes to Michael's interview that I thought would be very important to discuss. But then I also wanted to bring up what Summer was talking about. Okay. Now, Summer said that something within herself had opened up, and she would mention people, and events would begin to occur around her concerning whatever she mentioned. Like, she mentioned a rap star, and then all of a sudden, 2 hours later, a rap star shows up on TV, or a story about that rap star ended up on TV. That was one thing that stood out to me. And we had a conversation, me and Michael Paul did, where he was discussing that in the interview. And I thought that would be something to bring up. Now, she also says that the number 1111 is important to her story and about her husband passing away. She said she'd elaborate on it later. And she briefly spoke about numbers and synchronicity, which is what Michael Paul was talking about in his interview. He brought up synchronicity, and these are completely unrelated. Like, I interviewed Michael Paul separate from Summer, you know what I mean? And to my knowledge, they didn't know each other whatsoever. Am I correct on that, Mike?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they both brought this up, and they mentioned, or she mentioned 1111.
Yeah.
And for me, from what I've learned with my research into that, because I've actually checked out that before, and there are some who believe that the actual meaning of 1111 is a signal from an angelic being, that they're close by, like a guardian angel. But there are other interpretations of it. According to numerology, the number 11 is the master number, which signifies intuition, insight, and enlightenment. When it's paired together, 1111 is a message from the universe to become conscious and aware. You know what I mean? So that's what it represents according to numerology. Then 1111, this is something that I personally believe, because I've heard a lot of people have different spiritual interpretations of this, but from my personal experience, this is what I got out of when I researched it. Okay, 1111, it seems to be the number of like a spiritual awakening. It signifies that you're on the right path, that your actions are aligned with your soul's purpose. It also represents, to me, a moment of clarity, which you'll hear the term, when one door closes, another door opens. That's kind of what I take from it. Those are moments of clarity. And when I was interviewing Michael, he was discussing a part of his life where information was just flowing in, and he was constantly researching and finding out new information, and he had all of his stuff posted up on the walls, you know, and it just kept coming in. He'd highlight stuff, and I experienced that too. It was like my mind was a sponge. I just couldn't stop wanting to learn more and more, and it was taking in all this information, you know what I mean? Now, at the time, I could have, overclassified things, because I made a difference between a spiritual awakening and a moment of clarity, which he describes his moment of, or his spiritual awakening as being the same thing as what I experienced, but I always thought of it as like moments of clarity that happened in my life, you know. I never really thought of me having like a spiritual awakening or anything like that. So those are some of the things that we went over. There's also another aspect to this, and it's string theory. There's a note I wanted to mention. It's from Robert H. Williams. And it says, according to string theory, what appears to be empty space is actually a tumultuous ocean of springs vibrating at the precise frequencies that create the four dimensions that you and I call height, width, depth, and time. Okay, so I have two questions here. Does 1111 mean something? And the second one is, what is the importance of circles and squares, and does man bridge the gap between the circle and square? And Michael knows what that means. So.
Can I just say something before you go any further? You're not streaming on Wonderful World of Weirdness, Roger.
You should be.
Huh?
You should.
No,
be.
we're not. There's nothing showing. It's just waiting. I'm on it now, looking at it.
Hit refresh.
Yeah, I have.
Well, don't worry, it's streaming on other channels, if nothing else.
Yes.
If nothing else.
Oh, yeah, to let you know. That's all. Sorry, you carry on.
But with that being said, I'm going to open it up to you guys. Vince, you want to take a try at some of the stuff I was discussing?
Yeah, well, one thing I'd like to say about the whole 1111 thing, I've actually got an article coming up on my company page about that particular phenomenon, is that if you take two 11s, that's very similar to how you can divide the Tetractys, like we spoke about last time we did Into the Abyss. We spoke about the Tetractys of Pythagoras, and dividing it into two 11s is very similar to the second level of the Tetractys, which is the duad, which divides things into essentially masculine and feminine. So you can have a feminine 11, the first 11 is a feminine 11, and the second 11 is a masculine 11. Now, the way these are arranged, these four numerals, the 4 ones that you see in the two 11s, also are in a line that represents the great feminine axis. So you can see the fourth level of the Tetractys, which represents the cosmos. In other words, earth, water, air, and fire. Those 4 elements are the same as the 4 numerals in 1111. So what 1111 means is that you're firing on all 4 cylinders, in the sense that you're functioning on the level of earth, you're functioning on the level of water, you're functioning on the level of air, and on the level of fire, all at the same time and in synchronicity. So if you have your physical body is in good health, your emotions are in good health, your intellect and your mind and your curiosity and scientific learning is in good health, and your spirit's in good health, then you'll represent 1111, and that'll mean that's a sign of good health. So it's really just like a holy symbol. It's very similar to the quadrigetu, in fact, because the quadrigetu also has 4 parts. So 1111 is just a way of taking the quadrigetu and stretching it along a single dimension, which is pretty interesting.
Guys, I can't even begin to tell you how lovely it is to speak to you all like this, openly, without fear of somebody taking the mickey and pointing a finger. That's what's stopping a lot of this awakening, is a fear of the mickey taking. You're spot on. 1111 is just, it's a handshake from the universe. You're doing is right. What I've read in certain forums is that you're supposed to observe, be present in what you're actually doing, because what you're doing is on the right track, or what you're thinking is on the right track. So that fits exactly with what you've just said there, Vince. Exactly. And the square and circle thing is huge in Freemasonry. The Freemasons logo is a square and compass. The reason being is because the square represents the material world, or the terrestrial world as they call it, which is earth, air, fire and water, and the compass is the geometric tool for drawing a circle, and the circle represents the celestial or the eternal world. And this goes right the way back to an ancient ritual in the pyramid, the ritual of the twice-born, which we might mention a little bit later on. A fascinating ritual. The Colburn Bible talks about that in quite detail, and it mentions the brews, although it's called the brew of black fungus, so nobody really knows what on earth that's got in it. It's anybody's guess, really. But there's certain chemicals that induce this out-of-body experience, as they found out, and people are still finding out today. But yeah, the square and the circle is terrestrial and celestial.
That's good information right there. Whenever you were talking too, though, when it comes to spiritual awakenings, a lot of the stuff that you were describing to me whenever we were talking was, like I said, some of the stuff that I went through whenever I first sobered up, and the whole aspect that I had about it was something that was taught to me that really wasn't all that positive, because I was just a awful drunk and drug addict, you know what I mean? So basically is what it was. And I ended up getting my spiritual awakening because I hit rock bottom.
It's a common way to do it.
Yeah. So what happened to me is I had to learn about thresholds, and I had to learn that the mind has a certain threshold, and once you cross that, there's no coming back. You know what I mean? And I noticed that in the world there are different thresholds. It's just like when you look at a door, you know, when everybody talks about doors, down at the bottom you have a threshold that you walk through. You know, and they call it a threshold for a reason, because you're leaving one room and entering into another. And I had to learn that that doesn't just apply to a door, you know, it applies to everyday life. We have thresholds that we cross every day. And I learned that, you know, I had a moment of clarity during the worst time of my life where I had a aha thought where everything made sense, but it was only short-lived. You know what I mean? If it wasn't the right time, that moment of clarity that would have passed, and I would have gone to being the same person I was. You know, and luckily it was the right time and the right place, and I was actually able to freaking get help. And from there, that's when I started learning, and that's when things started opening up, and just something happened. There was no explanation for it. It just something happened. I'd tried to quit on my own for years and years and years, but it never worked. But something happened that time, and there's no explanation. And through that whole process of learning, I was going through what you were going through. My mind was like a sponge. I had to learn. I had to learn. It wasn't a question of I wanted to learn. I had to learn. You know what I mean? I would just constantly research and find out more. And I think that's probably why I'm the way I am today. But yeah,
That's good. It brought us all together.
Yeah. But I just wanted to put that out there. And also, there's a principle that I learned earlier on that I've really never heard anybody talk about. Have you guys ever heard of the principle of vacuum?
No.
Okay, so
In terms of physics, I think I may have heard about it, but I don't know anything about it in a spiritual sense.
okay, what do you know about the physics term? What is that?
I know that nature abhors a vacuum, so every time you have a vacuum open up in the physical world, it tends to get filled by something very quickly.
Okay. So see, with what I was taught was, I guess it would be a spiritual principle, because this principle of vacuum for me was, I was taught that nothing can sit still. You know what I mean? You can try to sit still and not have any changes in your life whatsoever, but the more you try to not do anything and not have changes going on in your life, something happens. There's always going to be change. There's always going to be something that happens in your life. You know what I mean? Like if you find a place where you believe it's complete emptiness doesn't exist. You know what I'm saying? There's always going to be something. That's the basic concept behind the principle of vacuum with what I learned.
That's very similar to what is called the third Hermetic principle in the Kabbalion, which is a great book. I definitely recommend the Kabbalion. The third Hermetic principle is the principle of vibration, and that basically states that everything that exists is vibrating at all times.
Yeah.
Therefore, there's nothing that's ever really at rest. Nothing is truly 100% at rest. Even a dead body is vibrating to some extent. And so it's all vibrations. Just the physical world's just vibrations upon vibrations.
Now, I've been wanting to get old John in on this too, because or John Clark, he's sophisticated on this one. Sorry, John. Now, you talk about vibrations a lot. Now, with that right there, what is your take on that?
Take on what? Which part?
Vibrations. You know,
Yeah.
what we were just discussing.
Yeah, I agree with it totally. Yeah, everything vibrates, as what Vince said. That's totally true. That's I can't really say no more than that. That is actually true. Um, and I think a lot of the problems that human beings have is, how can I say, if we were in the spirit realm, we say, look, you can open a box of tissues. They're all like nice and like full, like a full box. You know, they're full of like life in the tissues. Yeah, and when we're on this planet, as time goes on, more stuff comes on top, and then it bogs it down, until eventually it's just like your light is like dimmed and dimmed and dimmed, and as because you're in like the, I don't know, you call it the matrix in this world, whatever you call this life. And I think being awakened is just basically like being that box of tissues and just saying, right, I'm not going to be bogged down by all this anymore. I'm going to push up. I'm going to get back to as I was, and that's the life and the journey of, I say, of being awakened and raising your vibration, because your higher self, his vibration is up to the moon, so to speak. It's already done, but the battle is here. Just trying to get to that, back to that level, get the connection up. Get as high a vibration as you can, is my perspective of it. So that's what my take on it.
When you look into quantum physics, the proven facts are atoms vibrate. It's a fact. There is a saying: if it vibrates, it isn't real, and everything vibrates. And when you look at the subatomic particles, they keep disappearing and appearing, as if they're going somewhere to gain knowledge and then come back again to correct. Every cell in your body will renew itself within 7 years. So this is like from my perspective, this is like a calling home to make sure that we're going in the right direction, and then to rectify any variations in our path that we were making. They've also said that quantum physics also says they built it was a brick wall or any sort of barrier, and they noticed that the subatomic particles were going through the barrier as if it wasn't even there, to the other side and coming back again. So they're actually observing this. They know for a fact. And when you think that all atoms are 99% fresh air, and they accumulate into a particular shape. So you are 99% fresh air. These are facts. These are actual facts. So when Carl Jung noticed synchronicity, and he spent a few years researching it, he came to the conclusion that your mind is producing these synchronistic events, which isn't far wrong, because you're 99% of you is not there. It's just an avatar, if you like, that's being driven by some form of signal that even Nikola Tesla said he knows there is a signal, and your brain is just a receiver of this signal, and it directs you. So even he found it. He didn't know where the signal came from, though. But it's a really interesting thing when you talk to somebody who isn't enlightened or doesn't understand any of this, and you see their face just glaze over as soon as you start saying anything about you're not actually there. They go, oh, and their eyes are gone, oh, here we go. Hold on tight. It's got to be spooky ride, this one.
Pretty much.
I've seen this many
every
times.
Conversation with my partner.
Yeah, as soon as you suggest that there's something more to the world than just the material, people think, oh, here's another mentally ill person.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
And they can't help themselves. They really can't.
They can't.
That's why the Plato's analogy of the cave is so great.
Oh, fantastic.
Like Plato said way back then, you can go and see the truth and then come back and try and tell people about it, and they just simply won't believe you.
Yeah.
So you have to deal with it.
A lot of people, I had a brother like this, a lot of people are actually frightened in their inner core. They're terrified, so their subconscious fires back before they've even thought about it. Most people don't listen to understand, they listen to reply. So you can say something and they have no idea what you're talking about, but they'll still disagree with you. And then I said to people, oh, all right, okay, so you've actually gone and looked at, no, I've never looked into any of this. How can you say it's wrong then?
Yeah.
So many people are so, and it's this, not looking. This is what I've come to the conclusion. Enlightenment is, it's not wanting to look. They get so screwed up with this sleep, eat, entertainment, work syndrome, and they just keep going round and round and round. They don't want to look out of that because they're happy, and people notoriously don't like change anyway, and I'm not like that. I love a bit of change. Something changes, I'm going, oh, I'll get my teeth into this to see what goes on here. Even to the point of illness. I had a blood clot on the brain a while back, about 5 or 6 years ago, and I went into hospital. I with all my understanding of this subject, I wasn't afraid, and it was changed. So I was more accepting than my poor wife was. My wife was in pieces because we all thought that I had some sort of growth inside my head. And it wasn't until a while later they found out it was a blood clot and whatever. Then they cleared the blood clot, and here I am. I'm still walking and talking. So how bad can life be? But yeah, some people don't like change at all. They hate it.
Now you see, that goes back to kind of what.
Yeah, they just get comfortable.
Yeah.
I just found this. This is on my bookshelf. I don't know if you can see this. This is the Kybalion, my copy of it. I just found the principle of vibration is. It reads like this: nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. That's the principle of vibration, and that's what I thought of when you were talking about the principle of vacuum.
Yeah. Now, when you were just discussing that too, that goes back to what I was saying with thresholds. You know what I mean? Like all these people out there that don't want to change, they enjoy their lives and stuff. Now, see, they're like that, but the moment they cross a threshold that changes that, then all of a sudden things happen. You know what I mean? If things are hunky-dory, that's a term here in the United States, but if everything's hunky-dory for them, everything's running fine, they don't want anything to change. You know what I mean? The majority of people worry more about everything that consists within their household. If it's past their freaking driveway, they don't want nothing to do with it. You know what I mean? And that's just the way people are. I mean, it's not really anything to bash anybody about. It's just that's the way they are, you know. But when something happens that creates a moment of clarity in their minds, that's when something changes, and there's no real explanation for it, but it happens, and bam, they're off to the races, you know. So
like living in a house, so the curtains are always drawn.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't want to look outside. They don't want to, and if they do peer outside, oh, that's nice, and they come back into their own little bubble. They're frightened to go outside of it. That's my perception of it.
Exactly. Now, this synchronicity thing, I've heard not only Michael talk about it, but I've heard you all bringing it up. I've heard Vince talk about it extensively, so I'd like to hear more from Vince, get it on the stream so that we can hear from him, his take on it, because I know he's really good at this stuff. He loves talking about this stuff. Don't let him fool you. He's being real quiet, but he can fill your ear up if you'd let him. It's your turn, Vince.
Yeah, regarding synchronicity, what I think it ultimately is your higher self, as some of us have spoken about before. Your higher self just sending a really subtle message that things are actually under control and things are going according to plan. Because a lot of the time, it's easy to fall into a sense of despair. If you look at the state of the world, like when I first became a young man, there was the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War and then the great financial crisis. And it's easy to look at the state of the world and fall into a state of despair. And so I think that synchronicity is a way that you really do this. You really set yourself a reminder to come up at a certain time, just to wake up a bit and just to say, oh, hey, things aren't so bad. It's time for me to sort of come to a higher version of my own self, even if you don't transform into your ultimate higher self necessarily, but at least a slightly higher version, such that you can manifest a higher frequency in the environment around you. So I think that synchronicity, Carl Jung, he wrote the most about it. He's really the man who you want to read if you want to know about synchronicity. And he said basically what I just said, that it's a message from the higher self that you want to make sure you're on the right track. But if you do see synchronicity in your everyday life, you should take it as something meaningful. You know, you shouldn't just dismiss it as mere coincidence. Sometimes it is. Sometimes there are just mere coincidences. But if you're thinking about a friend of yours who you haven't spoke to in years and they ring on the phone, that's not just a coincidence. Most likely, 99% chance there's some kind of connection on a super physical level, like what Rupert Sheldrake calls the morphogenetic fields. That you might actually have a telepathic connection to a person based on your harmonic emotions, because you have so much in common. So that when you think about them ringing, that does actually send a message, or perhaps it's your thought about them ringing is perhaps a clue that's been planted by your higher self previously in the past, such that your friend does ring you at that time, and then you think about it and you just sort of, hey, I was just thinking about you, and you wake up a bit. Yeah, so they really just help you wake up.
You know, just after I listened to the interview between you, Roger, and Michael, at the end of the interview, you were talking about how we create things with our mind, and we actually make our own lives, and you talked about that man who kept the journal. So I finished listening to that talk that you did, and I was just sort of amazed, and it was so exciting and interesting. Jumped in the car, drove into town to do some grocery shopping, and I was walking through the shop, and I thought that I'd get some custard, but I didn't want to go back there to the aisle over there. So I thought, don't worry, I won't bother. And I turned around like this, and there was a container of custard that, like, somebody had obviously just put there, but like not a container of lollies or milk or any other thing, but right there, a custard. So, you know, for me, it was just so amazing that I'd had that really interesting experience of listening to you talk, followed by this really weird, unusual for me experience of thinking of something and then seeing it. So, yeah.
It is when it strikes you like that. It is, but you've got to be aware. You've got to be aware of what's going on around you to see it. And I think these synchronistic events are happening thousands of times per day, and we don't realize it. The subconscious just blocks it out, or you go, when they get really heavy, the synchronistic events, you start off by saying, oh, it's a coincidence. There is no coincidence. You know, there's no such thing as a coincidence. And when you say that to people, they go, oh, here we go. There's no such thing as coincidence. When you understand a Carl Jung, especially, and he's a very intelligent man, frighteningly intelligent man, Carl Jung. And for him to say that it's your higher self, and you know, this is your mind that's making that's a big leap. I also found another conclusion when you go back and look at the double slit experiment, which I presume everyone's looked at, where Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr had differing views on it. Niels Bohr said it's your mind, it's being viewed by a consciousness which changes light into a particle from a wave. And Albert Einstein, which I found very fascinating, this one, he said, no, God, which is basically consciousness that we're talking about, God knows what you're looking at and changes the view accordingly. So I thought, now that, for a scientist to say that is phenomenal. That's amazing. But he's saying the same thing as Niels Bohr. It's just that he's worded it slightly different. Put someone else's name in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Consciousness is God. That's it.
That dives deeper into Carl Jung too, because like when Carl Jung starts discussing the God conscience, that just completely, it's all encompassing. You know what I mean? Like, we're all connected by this God conscience, and we have a little bit of it within us, you know. And it was like whenever I was having my interview with you, Mike, you know, I was asking you if you and your buddy Russell about that connection you had, you know what I mean? And then right there when Vince was talking, you know what I mean, getting that phone call from from a friend years ago, and bam, all of a sudden you get a phone call from a guy wanting to do a movie with you, and guess who? You know what I mean? It just things happen, and you know it's just pretty cool that was actually said right here, because that was something that really stuck out to me in our interview, because you kept saying over and over again that it was like somebody was trying to prove something, you know what I mean? And that was really nice. I just wanted to add that in there. I didn't know.
Well, in my reading with Lorraine, she actually said at one point, Russell's telling me to tell you he's been sent to get you because you have a job to do. And it was after that I started getting this feeling that someone was trying to prove something to me. I mean, the synchronicities and the experience I had are just outrageous, totally outrageous. It's ridiculous. So much so when you talk to somebody that doesn't understand this subject, you know they don't believe you. You know it. You know they think you're just making it up for a laugh. You know they don't believe it. Yeah. There's something wrong with him. Don't talk to him about anything. You know. And that's why it's really nice to sit here today and talk to you all, and I feel really privileged to be able to talk to you all and explain 100% of how I feel about this subject without people pointing me with sticks.
Well, I think it's a whole new movement, really, that's starting to rise up. I see it all over the internet, is that people are starting to become a lot more open about this particular topic, about spiritual topics in general. Like you were talking about mockery. Yeah, I remember 20 years ago, I didn't know about these things 20 years ago, but if I had known about them and I tried to speak to people in my psychology course about them, who are all materialists, they're all coming at things from an evolutionary biological perspective, so they all believe in evolution and so on. And therefore they don't believe consciousness is God, they believe it evolved. They don't really see much merit in the whole spiritual side of things, and so they really are they would mock. But nowadays people seem to have realized that the materialist atheist narrative has kind of hit the ends of its usefulness, and it's no longer providing any real value to people, and they want something else. They want more. Like, people are tired of being told that they are merely atoms and that their consciousness is going to be extinguished and therefore life is meaningless. People are sick of the story.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something interesting about the consciousness is God thing. People say to me, do you believe in God? And I say, yes, I believe 100% that God exists. And they say, well, you can't believe 100% that God exists because you can't prove it. And I say, I can prove God exists. And they say, well, okay, do it. And I say, are you conscious? And they say, yes, of course. And I say, well, I've just proved the existence of God. And that's when it gets interesting, because they can react in a lot of different ways to that. But in my mind, I've proved the existence of God because of precisely what you said. My consciousness and God are the same thing.
Yeah. But that people get caught up with this putting a name to it. Every religion that I've looked at, I didn't look at many, very lightly, I've looked at quite a few. They're all talking the same language, except they're putting different people in front of them. No, it's called this. No, he's called that. No, this one. No, that one. And you go, it's the same thing. It's just overwhelming love. And when you talk to somebody who's gone onto a DMT trip and come back, they talk the same language. They're all saying virtually 90% of the time, what they've met, who they've met, who they spoke to. This overwhelming love, the all-encompassing help and protection, and just everything. They don't want to come back. And everybody, I've been looking into near-death experiences recently as well. They don't want to come back, but they have to come back because it's like an unfinished job. But they have to come back. Nobody wants to come back. You can feel their house with all the family waiting for them. They don't want to come back because they know it's not real. It's just a dreamlike existence that they're instilled into by whoever, entity-wise, just to teach them lessons, teach them the duality of life on Earth. It's just a fascinating thing when you look at near-death experiences, and they all say, and I've interviewed quite a few of these people, and when you talk to them, you say, what sex was this entity? And they go, female. Always female, because there is no sex when we're talking about this other realm. And the reason they say female is because all loving, all controlling, all protecting, they're all female qualities. They're all nurturing, they're and that's why they jump to the conclusion female. Female only means something here where we are. And there was one guy that I spoke to, and he said, no, it was a male. One person. So I said, why did you say it was male? He said, well, it was God. And I think that's his subconscious jumping in there and filling in the gaps. I couldn't find anybody else that said it was a male person. It was always a female type entity. They never see them, they just feel them. They just know they're there. Very interesting. Near-death experiences are very interesting.
Yeah, near-death experiences, they seem to be the one of the best ways, apart from a psychedelic, that you can really split your consciousness off from the rest of your being. Yeah, and thereby learn that consciousness is what you fundamentally are. Because once you've had a near-death experience and floated out of your body and looked down on your body from above, I've not had such an experience, but I've spoken to several people who have, then you realize that it's obviously not the brain that generates consciousness. If you're looking at your body from above, your brain's in your body, and if you're looking at it from somewhere else, obviously then consciousness is coming from somewhere else. And so it's hard to have an experience like that and then come back into your body and think, oh, that's right, my brain was generating consciousness all along. It's you've gone past that once you have an NDE.
Science has looked into this subject very, very deeply for many, many years, and they still can't find out that your brain, they still can't prove that your brain produces consciousness.
That's right.
They can't nail it down. They've been trying for decades and they can't nail it down. Consciousness is external. We're just a receiver.
Yeah, people say, I meet a lot of people who actually say, oh, they can actually measure consciousness. And I say, well, what instrument do they use to measure it with? And they can't answer that. You can measure heat with a thermometer, of course, and you can measure other things with an EEG and so on. But what instrument can you detect consciousness with? There's no such instrument.
Well, there's this very interesting experiment that started in Princeton University in the mid-'80s, and they call it the Global Consciousness Experiment. And it was just a basic, I don't know if anybody's looked at this, it's a random number generator. It was a binary code, series of ones and zeros. And they noticed that at certain times, the numbers stopped being random, and they started getting a uniformity. And then it went back to being random again. And then when they put a, for want of a better word, almanac of the Earth of what's happened underneath it, they found out that these things stopped being random when there was a tsunami. Then this was an earthquake, that was a volcano. 9/11 was one of these such incidents. 5 hours, I think it was, before 9/11, the numbers stopped being random, and then it hit, and it took 2 days to go back to being random again. So this is the Earth and everybody on it and their consciousness all going down the same routine, all doing and looking at the same thing and thinking the same thing, and it's an outpouring of grief for the whole world. And I think that, and they've got hundreds of these generators, these number generators all around the world now, and they're all giving the same results. So there's something there, and they're on the verge of discovering a tool, if you like, to prove it's there. But because the machine they've built and the answers it gives is made of atoms, it's still only thought. Everything's thought, which is consciousness itself.
Now, whenever you guys were discussing earlier the thing about receptors, the thing that stuck out to me was something that I think of a lot, and it comes to the actual brain. Our brain has receptacles, and these receptors inside of our brain transmits thoughts from place to place with electricity. So, whenever I look at things on any level, I think of it on the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. They're all connected. I also believe that it's okay to have your head up in the clouds, but your feet need to be firmly on the ground. You know what I mean? There's a little bit too much, too far, and then there's not enough. You know what I mean? So you got to find that balance in your life. So with that in mind, I look at it like this. Maybe science doesn't fully understand what those receptors can actually do. Maybe there is something physical going on that nobody knows about because we're not scientifically evolved, I guess you could say, to understand fully what the brain is doing. I think scientists have agreed with me on that too, by the way. I'm not quite sure about that, but I'm pretty sure we don't really know much about the human brain. So, and then another thing too, you were just talking about it, Mike. There's a guy I really love watching on YouTube, and he has his own show. It's called New Thinking Aloud. I go on.
He's awesome. Jeffrey Mishlove.
Yes. Yeah.
Jeffrey Mishlove. Yeah, he's wicked. He's had some amazing interviews.
Yes. And he had this one on there where a guy was talking about they took these little bitty robots. You remember back in the 80s they had those little marching robots. He stuck them in a pool table, and he tried to group them up and everything, and he found out that these robots, which were electronical, actually wanted to eventually start forming up into groups together on their own. You know what I'm saying? A machine. So what causes these machines to want to actually group up as a group rather than go randomly along any way they wanted to? Eventually they did always group up into ones and twos and threes, you know what I mean? But they always tried to do it. And I thought that was interesting when you were discussing that. And if you've never checked him out, I'd suggest checking him out. He is an excellent guy. So,
has
I
anybody
recommend it too. He's been doing great work for 30 years as well. Like, he's got interviews from the 1980s that are absolutely genius.
Has anybody seen the experiments with the Newton's cradle? Do you know that Newton's cradle thing where you got the balls here and it goes tick, tick, tick?
Mm-hmm.
You've done, but they've done that. This is all over YouTube, and they've put a board across all of them, and they've got this huge setup with this Newton's cradle, and then they pull the board away and it goes like a wave, and then the wave keeps changing. It's almost as if it's changing frequency, and eventually they're all beating together. And there's another experiment with sound where they've got a tuning fork. They put a ping pong ball up against a piece of metal, and they've got a tuning fork, and they put that up against another piece of metal, and when you hit the same resonant frequency of the ping pong ball and the left piece of metal, the ping pong ball jumps. But when you get a different tuning fork and you use a different resonant frequency, it doesn't move at all. There's so many legends and rumors about the pyramid in Giza, where the stones were levitated into position, but with the use of sound, and everybody's poo-pooed this idea, and then all of a sudden videos of cymatics started turning up on YouTube, which they're all over it. You type in cymatics, it's amazing to watch these tiny pieces of sand that are given a particular frequency. They produce shapes, and they start going through quite a lot of the religious shapes, like the cross and all the rest of it. And the higher the frequency, the more intricate the shape is. But you see these shapes all over Christian churches. These particular, especially in stained glass windows, high up on stained glass windows. And they've been jumping out at me for quite a while. Then I discovered quite a few years ago, 10 years ago, cymatics. It's just this, what we think is real, is just so much more than we've been really dumbed down. The gist of it, we really have been dumbed down, and we can't. How can we draw a conclusion on an ethereal world or a spiritual world? Because we're looking at that with the eyes that we think this is real. But when we find out what this actually is, what we're doing here, then we can look at it, and then I'll guarantee it will be very similar. It's just that we thought it was different.
Yep.
Guys, can I ask a question that's sort of a little bit different from this? It's something that you've mentioned earlier. You mentioned about joining dots that weren't there. Like, I have that experience a lot, and I find it very disconcerting because I can't tell what's real and what isn't real. What do you have
Nothing's
to say
real.
about that joining dots that's not there?
Yeah, nothing's real. So you can join any dots you like.
Really?
Nothing's real. So any two things could potentially be dots that are joined on some different level, on some higher or lower level. Yeah, like once you abandon the materialist atomist explanation, because the materialist explanation says everything is a coincidence. Like Michael said, the spiritualist explanation, once you understand how things work, you realize there are essentially no coincidences. But the materialist explanation is that everything is a coincidence, and that there is no higher meaning to anything. So yeah, it's different.
So I'm not mad.
No, not at all.
No.
I've been having these gut feelings. I can see two, and they could be half a day apart. Two situations occur, and I'm going over it in my head, and in my head I'm looking at the two, and I know they're linked. I have no idea how they're linked. I have no idea why they're linked, or what the outcome's going to be, but I know they're linked. And then you go 2 months down the line, poof, there we go. There was the link. I've now found the link. And I've been doing that for years. It drives me mad, exactly the same. Because you do feel like you're inventing things.
Well, that actually is a process, though, because, like, excuse me, but just think about this real quick, okay? You remember the old puzzle books they used to have? Everybody loved going in and connecting the dots, okay?
Yep.
It's been something that everybody's been discussing. They've been doing it for at least 150 years, you know, and that is a topic that's really interesting that nobody really has a conversation about. But there is something in our mind that makes us to where we have to connect those dots. Now, what happens with what you guys are discussing is that's an overdrive. You know what I'm saying? Something above human power is causing that because these synchronicities are happening. You know, like with my son, when he first moved in with me, we had a tree where the branches were getting real close to the ground. And just out of nowhere, I told him, I was like, before you move out, you're going to climb up that tree and you're going to voluntarily cut that tree branch down. He's like, oh, no, I'm not. He swore up and down he wasn't going to do it. And a week after he moved out, I don't even think he remembered the conversation, but a week after he moved out, the freaking branch collapsed. And guess what he did? He climbed up that freaking tree and cut that branch down. That was 2 years after we had that conversation. Just out of nowhere, I knew that he was going to end up cutting that tree because he was so obsessed with trimming that damn tree. You know what I mean? He was so obsessed. And I knew that was what he was going to do. I just didn't know the circumstances of why it was going to happen, but I did know at the time. And when he went out and did it, I just sat there and I kept quiet. And I was like, he probably doesn't even remember having that conversation. You know? So...
That's the thing with things like that. People don't, because it's not immediately happening within 10 or 15 seconds. They dismiss it. And they forget that they've had the conversation. I've been in similar situations. And I've had to remind. And I went, do you remember that medium I went to see? This was a while ago, to a friend of mine he's a steel erector. So he's a very hands-on material person. Do you remember that medium I went to see? Yeah. Now look at what's just happened. And he went... Oh yeah, that's gone. But you know, 20 seconds down the line, he's gone. Whoop. It's all gone. He's forgotten about it again. But I think that's what this movement is doing. To wake up the public. You have to reach a tipping point of understanding, and then, like the 100th monkey experiment. It's a very fascinating experiment. Some people say it was real. Some people say it wasn't. But when your consciousness reaches a tipping point, then everybody just accepts it as being right. And I think that's the point we have to go to.
Yeah, it could happen here. We get 99 people on this show, and then there could be the 100th person who may have otherwise been an extremely skeptical materialist, atheist, and they listen to us and they think, well, if that many people are talking about spirituality and making sense, there must be something to it. And then bang.
I've got a friend. My history is I'm a bit of a geek. I build computers and so on and so forth. So talking to a friend of mine about this subject, who's a very material person, and his son was in the room, and I've known this family for 30 years, and his son went, Mike, if anybody else told me that, I would immediately write them off. Immediately. He said, but because I understand what a logical person you are, that gives that, what you've just said, so much credibility. But that's not what the general public see, is it? He's seen it over 30 years. When the general public see you for the first time, and all of a sudden you go, oh, nothing's real, you know. And they go, oh, here we go. he's fell off the earth, that one there. He's away with the fairies.
Yeah, the same thing happened to David Icke. I don't know if you know much about David Icke, but you've mentioned a couple of things that he has also spoken about, like the random number phenomenon. And he had the same deal. He took ayahuasca in South America, and then he came back to Britain and started telling everybody about how infinite love is the only solution, and that God is consciousness, and that karma and reincarnation is real, and that the universe is a fundamentally all right place to be. There's nothing to really worry about. And you saw what happened to him. You know, he's famously written off as somebody who's completely nuts. And really, if I think about it, he's probably the most accurate predictor of anything that I know of anybody in the world.
See, the thing is with David Icke, he tells you the answer, without explaining any of the routes. Now, that's okay when you're talking to like-minded people. But when you're talking to the general public as such, you have to try to keep them with you and explain the route, and then the end answer makes total sense. But when you just go, gosh, no, none of this is real. Like, oh, hold on a minute. There's no lead up to it. It's like a slap round the face. Because he'd done a video with his, I sat and watched his video. I can't remember what it was called now, his film. And he said, I bet you think that chair is real that you're sitting in. And it sounds like a line out of The Matrix, which was another fantastic film about this whole subject.
Yeah.
Now, Michael, there was something else that or a couple things that you mentioned that I really think that would be cool to talk about too. And it's like in our interview, you were talking about that tsunami wave of information that flowed into you. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I really think that that's important because there's a process that was going on there. You know, like first I asked you about that kind of feeling that you had with Russell whenever he moved into the YMCA and you had that connection.
Yeah.
And then you started going into discussing the tsunami wave of information that was flowing in, and then you also mentioned feeling pains in the stomach whenever you experience these kind of events that happen, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you said also that it felt like you were having a seizure at some point. And, And with the visions, that part about the jigsaw puzzle and stuff like that, like these to me, it sounds like processes that you were going through, you know what I mean? Physical processes as well as emotional and mental and spiritual, you know what I mean? So
well, when I was putting the book together, it was called The Truth originally, and this was back in I think it was about June 2011 I actually finished this. And as I was putting the information together, it happened 3 times. I'd be writing down things, and I'd be looking at one screen on the computer and then looking at the other screen, and I'd read a line out of this piece over here, and then there was a biblical reference over on this screen, and Jesus said so and so and so and so, and I'm going, oh, hang on a minute, that fits in with what I'm finding out about quantum physics over here. Is there's a link with quantum physics, and I didn't know what the link was. I now know it was DMT, because he was in the scene and he practiced the ritual of the twice born. But there was a link, and I didn't know. And my room was full of these bits of paper, all up on. It was like a nutty professor's room. Seriously, it was quite embarrassing when anybody saw it, because I go, oh no, don't ask. So there was bits of paper all over where I'd found clues and links between things, but I didn't know what the link was. I knew they were linked, but I didn't know why. And then all of a sudden, I'm writing things, and I read one line, writing things down, read a line here, and I went, and it was like the way I explain it was like walking into a cold swimming pool on a boiling hot day, and the cold water hits you around the navel area, and you can't quite catch your breath. And as I was leaning back like this, the pictures in my mind, it went like this, and it was bits of jigsaw like this all in front of me, and I went, stop, and it went, just stopped. So I got up, I went and made a cup of coffee, and I come back again, and then I said, show me slowly. And tiny little bits of jigsaw, one at a time, was put in place. I could see them, I could physically see them, not in reality, but in my mind's eye. And each piece of jigsaw was a piece of what I was putting on the wall. So, and I just followed it, and it started to tell a story. The story was mapping out in front of me. And it went from bits of paper all over the place with blue tack to one long line where all the bits matched, and I could read that piece in that one, and it matched with that, and it matched with that, and the story just gradually unfolded. And then when I'd finished that, I'd moved them all away, put them out, and I started mapping the next piece up. And this was about biblical fact, the silly things that we've been told that aren't true, and they're easily provable, but with a bit of research. And 3 times, unbelievable. And I've never been through anything like that since. And that was over I'd say it was 3 times over a 6-month period. And then when I went to see the medium, again, Lorraine Reese, an amazing medium, absolutely unbelievable, frighteningly accurate. She turned around and said, "You've done it." So I said, "Done what?" She said, "You've done what you've been asked to do." I said, "Well, I don't even know what I was asked to do, to be honest with you." So this thing that she said in one of the previous, that Russell's come to get you because you've got a job to do, she said, "You've done it." I said, "But nothing's come out of it." She went, "No, it will. Don't worry, it will. Just go with the flow." So that was, and I ended up with the book. I'm not the sort of person to write a book, especially on biblical fact and the occult, which is the term for all this, and everybody backs away from that word, occult. They'll go, means evil. No, it doesn't. It means secret. Something have you? The word occult. It means secret and hidden. They go, oh. Anyway, I got to go.
Yeah.
As if you're talking about devil worship or something.
So what do you guys think about that, with how he explained right there all the things that happened to him when in that moment? Like, what do you think in your mind was taking place?
I've had a very strangely similar physical experience to what you described, Michael, of that cold stuff happening. So about 2 years before my daughter killed herself, I started getting this really strange feeling in my body of, I used to call it skin shocks. And it was just like you say, that cold thing, that thing. And it would just happen out of the blue for about 2 years. When the policeman came and told me, it happened to my whole body, from my fingers all the way through to the center of my body. And it stayed in my body for about 2 days. And then it slowly sort of started clearing from my extremities. And since then it's stayed in this similar, but I've never heard anybody explain it or talk about anything like that. And when I went to try and speak to the doctor about this thing that was happening to me, he just you're the first person I've ever heard that said anything even like remotely connected to what I was experiencing. So
well, when I've spoken to mediums about this, because it was very concerning.
Yes, yes.
As if I was having some sort of seizure or a problem, and I didn't realise that it was going on. When I've spoken to mediums, they say no, that was a download. Something was downloading. The information and knowledge was just hitting you, and it really was like a tsunami of information, and it was just overwhelming. I'm quite a logical person, and to sit and talk like this has taken me 17 years to be able to say this, but it was an information download, and you're probably coming across the same thing, but with a more of a direct item, more of a direct piece of information.
Okay. Fascinating.
I had a dream New Year's Day, and it's just slightly linked to what we're talking about. Basically, in a dream, it was I kept seeing code all night. I was seeing code, like 5-6 figure numbers, letters, all coming across like on a black screen, white numbers. And this went on for hours. I kept seeing it. And I thought, what the hell does this mean? Then I spoke a word, which of a language that I don't know. But I spoke it. It meant something I don't know what. And there was something else. I've told Bob this. What was the last bit? Can you remember? But I said it in my video as well. I can't remember what the last bit.
Cocoon. Was it?
Cocoon. Oh yeah.
There was
and
a
I saw like a huge like village, town, city, and it had like some sort of cocoon on it. And I saw that all day, and I don't know what I knew I was meant to talk about it because the dream had ended, but I kept seeing that village or that town all day. I kept seeing it, and I still don't know the proper meaning to it, other than the fact it had some sort of cocoon around it. But I've not been able to understand what all that meant. I don't know if it makes any sense to any of you guys, but especially the code. I've got no understanding what that means. So I just thought I'd share that with you because we've been talking on that sort of, But I've had the number 444 is it come up loads of times. It did come up before the new year, and I was told that it's to do with communication with angels, something like that. And it actually, once I was open to that, I felt that I did have communication with angels. For me, how I know the difference is angels tend to communicate with visually. They show you images, whereas other forms of communication from your higher self could be images, but it can be like a spoken word. But with angels, it tends to, with me anyway, it always tends to be like images, always images, or show me something, and I think, oh right, that makes sense, and I go on from there. So that's just my view on it.
What was you getting ready to say, Events?
I was just going to say it would be a good topic for perhaps another show. Like, I feel like we've got enough. We could easily do another show about the similar sort of material. Mm-hmm. We've got enough to talk about. I think we're only scratching the surface, really.
It's
especially when it comes to what people out there in the wider audience already understand. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know for a fact that there's a lot of really highly educated people out there who haven't even begun to think about the world in terms of spirituality. They're still purely in the materialist paradigm because they've never met anybody they respected who could explain anything else. And that's what I think we can do well. have a show full of not completely crazy people, maybe slightly crazy, but not completely crazy, and so people can listen to us and think, hey, these guys just might be onto something.
Sounds like a plan. Now, when you mentioned the word paradigm too, that is something that really stuck out to me on the tech talk that me and Tan and Mark had when it comes to AI and the thought process that goes into AI. Now, in order for AI to work, it has to be able to freaking understand the differences in paradigms. So it has to do a paradigm shift. So when we're thinking, okay, the one thing that separates us from artificial intelligence is the fact that whenever something pops up, something changes at the snap of the finger, our brain is able to freaking change from the old paradigm to the new paradigm, which includes that change. Okay, and computers have never been able to do that, and that's what they're working on right now. And I find that pretty interesting too. Whenever you always bring paradigm up, and that sticks out to me, you know.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And I agree. I think there's a whole lot of stuff that we could be discussing. See, this is the good stuff. This is what people really should be wanting to listen to, because we're talking sensible, you know. And I respect each and every one of you, because the stuff that you've said is really, really fascinating for me. You know what I mean? I love it. I love doing research on this stuff and finding out things and going deeper into it. So it's just like I went through and discussed with you guys the stuff that Michael had just brought up in his interview, you know, which this stuff, I've heard it over and over again, okay? It wasn't as much as what Mike was talking about with Summer, but she even brought up the same basic principles in a different way, you know, but you can always hear it if you just take time to listen to people. And there's more to it. John brought it up earlier today when it came to Summer. I mean, there's just something that's there that's more than just seeing ghosts. You know what I mean? And it'd be easy to just sign it off as saying, "Oh, she just saw a ghost. She just saw this." But it goes with generations. You know what I mean? This stuff happens with people through generations, grandmothers to mothers, to daughters, sons, fathers, and I've been noticing that a lot too. So that's an aspect of it that really sticks out to me.
When you look at how your subconscious mind gets programmed between the ages of birth and 7, your surroundings will program your subconscious, and then your subconscious builds brick walls between, well, that's not possible because I'm here, and I will never do that because I haven't got this, and they're the brick walls. They're the knee-jerk reactions that you react to for the rest of your life. Psychology tells you that if you do something a certain amount of times, it gets instilled into your subconscious, and that's how you can retrain yourself. It's very difficult. You can retrain yourself, but with the children, as you just said, like if the mother's psychic, then the daughter is more inclined to be psychic. It's because they're in an environment where these brick walls have not been built. So the brick walls where Dad, I just saw something. No, you didn't. Take the notice of that. You know, they don't say that. And I know a woman whose mother was psychic. Her mother never said, "Don't take any notice of that. It's just ignore that." She always encouraged it. Yeah, you may well have seen it, and it becomes such a natural thing which it is. This is all nature. This is all Mother Nature at work. That's what we're talking about. So that I mean, most of the public have gone down this route with the big thick brick walls. I can't do this. I can't do that. I got a friend incredibly negative because of the way he was brought up. And I say, well, just do that. I'd never be able to do that. So what are you talking about? It's just click that on there. This was a computer, and he clicked it. He went, I've never done anything like that before. You just clicked. All you done was clicked it. What's the matter? You've just done that. Wow. But he was forever saying, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do this.
Yeah.
So this inbuilt thing, mediumistic and psychic thing, everybody's got it, as far as I can see. Everybody has it. It's just that we have to get to a point in our subconscious where we know it's possible, and then it will become more and more into use every single day. I had an experience with a woman that was training me to be a medium, and I never knew. I just thought she was training me to meditate, and then she started mentioning the word circle every now and again, and I'm going, hold up, go with the flow, don't say anything, just go with the flow. And then she ended up putting me in front of people. Right, you've got to give this lady a reading now. And I'm going, Sue, what are you doing to me? I can't do something like this. And I ended up giving this woman a reading. And this was at the point when I didn't realize whether everything was just pure consciousness, so it's just a stream of information, or whether these mediums actually talk to dead people, the dead people's consciousness. I didn't realize the two was intertwined, and I was dancing between the two. Yeah, they do. No, they don't. It's just information in the universe. And then I gave this woman a reading. I said, the lady at the back there, and I said, I'm getting a vivid image, which I was. It was very vivid in my mind's eye. I said, there's a guy laying on his side. I said, he's passed. And then I started coming out with things like, I could tell you his trousers were all gathered where his trousers were about 5 sizes too big, and he put a big belt on and he pulled it close. He had brown hair, but he used to dye it black. I could see the swirls on the carpet, and she's going, no. I feel like a right one now. You know, I think to myself, I just want the ground to open up in front of about 40 people, this was. So I said, okay, no problems. And I got given words, don't you dare do that. And I thought, and it was an instruction that was different to the picture. And the instruction was from somebody and to someone. So it was almost like someone saying it. And that was different. But I didn't say that. I said, okay, no problem, I'll just get me coat. And then we had a bit of an interval. And then the other woman got up and she went, I'm getting given the same picture now. I said to the same woman, there's bloke died, so-and-so and so, this happens, that's happened, that's happened. The same sort of route. And then she went, and he's telling me to tell you, don't you dare do that. And I went, oh my God. Whatever these people do, I've just done it. I had no idea what I'd done. And it took about 3 days for me to get my head around, no, the consciousness that is that person hasn't died. It is one of the streams of a global consciousness. So there's 8.5 billion streams all making up a global consciousness, and we are all one separate stream. And that was a real turning point for me, because now I know that they talk to, not dead people, because the person doesn't really exist. They're talking to that person's personality. That was a big turning point for me.
I think a lot of people also forget the reason why people are called mediums. The term medium, you know what I mean? It's not a power or anything that's coming from within yourself. You're a vessel for this stuff to travel through, you know what I mean? And I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't take into consideration. And mediums have been saying that for years. I mean, forever. And when I say years, I'm talking thousands of years. You know what I mean? They've always had that principle. So I that's the one thing that I do want to mention as well. I mean, you just the vessel that this information can travel through, you know. I think John had to go off and he said that there's going to be times where he'll have to break away and everything. With what was been said, is there anything else that you guys would like to add to it that we've not discussed? Nothing?
No, not really.
Now, before we go, though, I do want to mention that Bob Dub convinced me to come on and do a stream with her about what dualism, duality, and that's something that we've all been kind of talking about and everything. I know Mike mentioned it and everything, and Vincent's big on that too. I'm pretty sure he's mentioned it a few times. So if you guys want to come on to her show with me, I finally was able to convince her to do a show. I ended up, she came on to this one, well, we need to do one, and then I told her, well, you know, I really didn't want to put Into the Abyss onto the schedule, so I was able to take my show off the schedule and put hers on there, so we're good. And,
Roger, I don't remember this happening this way. If it's not the same memory, I don't have the same memory of these events that you seem to have.
I'm delusional. You got to be careful with me. I'm delusional.
I see so. I see so.
But
they're on different days. Into the Abyss and dualities. They're on different days.
But she's. We're gonna get it going and everything, and if you guys want to come on and be a part of that, you're more than welcome. I believe, what is that, tomorrow?
Tomorrow, midnight tomorrow.
And I think the best thing to start it out with is the topic that you brought up in the first place. It's the masculine and the feminine. That would be the perfect way of starting it out. If you guys want to come on in and check it out, you're more than welcome to show up, you know. This is basically how we do it. We just hang out and we talk about this information and stuff like that and let it go from there. So you guys, how did you like the episode so far?
It was cool. I love today's episode. It was brilliant. I love Michael's got some really interesting stories.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that we can offer something for him and for the other guys in the stream here, that we can offer like a safe haven for people who want to talk about non-materialist topics, but tired of being laughed at when they try and bring them up.
Right.
Someone wants to bring up something other than just the sport and the booze and the politics. Yeah, it's hard sometimes. So I think we can really provide a service for a lot of people by doing this show.
Yeah. And I was really interested in getting all you guys together because you guys really fit together, being honest. Like hand in a glove to be serious. Because like John, he's quiet and everything today, but he's big on vibrations and stuff, and that's what Bob talks about, vibrations, and so does Vince too, don't you?
Yeah, vibrations, frequencies, energies, they all tie together.
And then John contacted me, said, man, you got to interview this guy. And I'm sitting there and I watched his video, and the more I listened to him, I'm like, oh my goodness, I do have to freaking interview this guy. So I interview him, and then he just starts saying a whole bunch of more good stuff, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh wow. So I knew that it would be a good deal to have everybody come together and do a show together and get this stuff out. And like you said, Vincent, we could do so much more. You guys are always welcome. I don't want to set it up as a scheduled event, you know what I mean? So whenever we do this, it'll be organized on a certain day, and we can get it together and have it going good. So
yep, it sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
Now, John, you want to say something?
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
I'm glad that everybody showed up here. I'm glad that you guys were able to get everything out and say what you needed to say. I'm completely amazed by it. So, with that being said, I want to thank everybody for being here, and we'll end it here. I'll talk to you guys later.
Brilliant, guys. It's lovely to meet you.
All right.
Cheers,
too.
guys. Love to talk to you all. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Very lovely. Thank you, guys. See you.
See you soon.
Bye, guys. Sorry, I didn't have my mic on.
I'll talk to you later.
See you soon. Bye.